And when people lose interest in elections, something else happens. If you lose faith in the ballot, then people develop faith in the bullet.
The threshold for the presidential election was 50% plus one vote, one which was challenged on the basis of a plot to rig the election. Yet, like in 2007, and as Johan Kriegler observed, it remains ever more difficult to determine the full truth about Kenya's elections. We found evidence of mass irregularities and hidden information that have muddied what ought to be a clear view of who Kenyans chose to represent them at all political levels, and symptoms of an electoral system that still needs fixing.
The nation must know that the IEBC has failed.
But that the question of electoral malpractices still lingers points to something that likely all Kenyans know, but haven't yet admitted to themselves.
Action taken would deter the next person. But because we tend to sweep things under the carpet, then people behave the same way.
And please listen to us, there is something wrong.
I did not say figures are being cooked, but I said by staying with the papers for so long, one would suspect they are cooking. There's a difference between suspecting and the actual cooking. Is this a sufuria?
We were interested in finding out what was still a the truth about what was still a contested result a year after the March 4th, 2013 election.
March the 30th, 2013. A light drizzle in the capital would do nothing to cool the anxiety that gripped the country. The 6-judge bench that was supposed to deliver its decision in the morning would do so starting at 5 p.m.
It is the decision of the court that the third and fourth respondents were validly elected.
The first time that the Supreme Court was being tested in an election petition, and the outcome of that petition also was one that in some quarters had been discredited. So we thought that it might be a good idea to try and go and find out exactly what happened.
The court had the opportunity to hear evidence from all sides. So we were in a very good position to basically find out whether there was any manipulation or there was any deliberate favoring of one candidate or the other. And we basically said no.
We also getting the information was it was easy and it was hard. In this sense, the information was available, but it was so much that going through all of it was almost impossible. So, if you recall, we had all the Form 34As from across the country. And our goal was to tabulate all of those things. Now, unfortunately, we didn't even get to that stage. Then there was also reading of electoral laws, reading of tender documents, contracts, that would help us assess the state of affairs at the IEBC, in addition to just finding out what the results were. Then, of course, our break was a secretly recorded conversation that was given to us that gave us certain insights about the election that we're able to then follow.
In Africa, in Senegal, the company in Senegal, Sierra Leone, not the year of Kama. Number D, where the coach, for the money to be number. Put Louis, what do you bet more? I think you're aware of that.
Yes, I'm aware.
We took IEBC Chairman Isaac Hassan's advice. We chose to look into things ourselves.
The paper trail of the March 2013 presidential election is long and difficult to follow, but in so doing, we now have printouts of Form 34s from across constituencies in Kenya. These Form 34s we were able to print out on the basis of evidence that the IEBC presented to the Supreme Court during the Supreme Court petition after the election. A Form 34 looks something like this.
In terms of what we had envisioned for the story, we were able to achieve perhaps, let me see, perhaps 60% of what we wanted to achieve. The tabulation was a very big part of our expectation in terms of what we would find or not find. Now, not being able to do that in full was clearly a very important thing that we missed, and it's the most obvious thing to have done as a journalist, right? As considering that was the most contested part of the election, not that results were manipulated or that sort of thing, but that the result itself was not as represented by the IEBC. Now, if we were unable to answer that question, then a big part of the premise for that investigation then becomes null and void. So, I mean, looking back, that was the one thing that I felt we were unable to do, but it was out of our control.
There was some finger which was influencing the results, and we managed to get some people who were involved in manipulation of these results.
I have no doubt in my mind that security agencies just collapsed it, just made sure it didn't work.
It is quite clear that elements in both ODM and PNU participated in exaggerating the ballots in their areas. It was not in every place.
It was fairly easy to get interviews from members of the opposition for obvious reasons. They had an axe to grind. They wanted to try and play up their narrative of what happened, their version of events.
The very fact that even people like us who were appointed agents had difficulties with getting entry. Raila drew the conclusion that it was like a military coup, and I agree.
Now, on the other side, especially the Jubilee Party, they were very reluctant to talk to us. None of the members of the top brass wanted to speak to us. So what we wound up doing is speaking to operatives, people who were very deeply involved in the process. But in terms of just prominence, they were nowhere near matching the kind of prominence that people like Raila Odinga or Kalonzo Musyoka would have brought to the documentary. It would have been nice to hear from the candidates themselves.
We won this election at 6 a.m. By 9 a.m., the only thing I was doing myself is just checking the Assumption of Office Act and ensuring that we are able to second the right people.
Of course, there was a chance of a rerun if those spoiled votes went on to count. In fact, I would tell you, if the event that did not pass 50+1 would have moved to court on the issue of rejected votes.
A final assessment of what really was the true count at the election is something that Chief Justice Willie Mutunga has had time to think about. Ironically, time is the one thing he and the Supreme Court bench didn't have when the case was ongoing.
I would want an extension on one thing, and that is the whole issue of scrutiny, right? Because if you're going to scrutinize the papers and so forth, you really need more than 14 days.
In the bowels of one of Nairobi's suburbs, we met Joseph, not his real name, working on a number of new projects on his computers. On his walls are the cryptic creeds of men and women whose worlds exist online, behind the walls put up to protect individuals, institutions, and government's private information. Joseph tells us that he's a black hat, or a person who hacks into people's private networks out of pure malice or for fun. His shadowy part in the election debacle, he claims, started on March the 4th, 2013. He is a man in the video.
And get into the CanCall servers.
Well, I think what the story did was debunk a very widely held claim that there had been a digital disruption. So we spoke to the source of that information, and then we debunked it using different people within the industry.
There's no K.
Yeah.
The lowest form of data is KB. Then you move to MB, then you move to GB, then you move to TB. Okay? There's no K. So you find this size 51,000 K
yes,
cannot.
So it means that
it's
it
questionable.
may
manipulated. It may have been manipulated.
Who took a look at the information that he was saying, he was able to have accessed and said that it wouldn't have been possible to have hosted that data on the kind of server that, or the kind of software that he was talking about. And I think that was a very important thing, because investigations don't just set out to prove, they also set out to debunk and lay the record straight. So that was something I was particularly proud of, because going into the investigation, it was widely assumed that set of information would have held water. But when it did not, I think we did the right thing in establishing what the real facts were and not being carried by a public narrative.
When it came to 50+1, we are the first court in the world to deal with that issue.